A couple booked a $10,000 dream cruise. They bought the travel insurance, but they had to cancel due to a covered reason. Yet the insurance company said denied. And not because they didn't have the insurance, but because they made one small mistake when they bought the policy. A mistake almost nobody knows about. I'm going to show you how to avoid this and 9 other mistakes today, because travel insurance is one of those things most of us just buy and forget. We think we're covered, but the moment we file a claim, we find out we're not. I'm Gary with Optimal Cruising, bringing you fresh cruise advice, money-saving hacks, and secret strategies the cruise lines don't advertise. Let's get started. I used to never buy cruise travel insurance, but now I won't go anywhere without it. After what happened to a friend of mine who lost his entire cruise because of a hurricane. Not that the cruise didn't sail, it still did, but he couldn't get there. And he bought travel insurance, but he bought it too late. About a week before, he started thinking this hurricane was going to be a problem. He started hearing about it on the news, so he bought some travel insurance. But once that storm or tropical depression has already been named, it's considered a pre-existing event. If you buy the insurance after that fact, it's not going to cover anything related to a storm that was already known about. So the best thing you can do to avoid this kind of pitfall is buy your cruise travel insurance as soon as you book the cruise. That doesn't mean book it with the cruise line or travel agent, but wherever you're going to get it right away, because they take seriously a lot of pre-existing conditions, which brings me to this next point. Cruise travel insurance is not just about recovering your money if you can't make the cruise due to a covered reason, but it can also cover you for medical expenses when you're on the cruise or in a foreign country. And this can be very significant because a lot of US-based health insurance plans will not cover those things, especially if you need something like a medical evacuation or a helivac from the cruise ship. That can be extremely expensive, and that's what these policies are for. But be aware that they don't tend to cover a lot of pre-existing medical conditions. So when you're buying that policy, if you've been seen by a doctor for a certain condition in the last 6 months, in some cases 12 months, they're going to consider that pre-existing. And if you have a problem related to that on your cruise or on your trip, they're not going to cover it. Now, they're not typically looking back at a surgery you had 5 years ago, but anything you're currently being treated for, taking a prescription medication for, waiting for some test results to come back on, those things would be considered pre-existing. And if you have an event related to that on your vacation or cruise, it will likely be denied. So what can you do about this? Well, you can pay a premium to get a pre-existing conditions waiver. So if you have some conditions, you want to pay that premium because honestly, that's probably the most likely thing to give you a problem on this trip. So the waivers can be pricey, and there's a limited time when they can be purchased. You have to purchase the policy, usually within a week or 2 of booking that trip, and then you can get the pre-existing conditions waiver. A lot of cruisers miss this, and they miss the window for that. And then they're buying insurance for things that are not likely at all to happen. Never assume anything when it comes to pre-existing conditions. Always call your insurer first and ask so you know you're covered. Speaking of which, when you go on a cruise or a trip outside of the country, do you just wing it or do you buy the insurance? Let me know in the comments below. One of the policies I like to purchase is one that has a cancel for any reason clause. Now, this is not automatic. You have to look for it. I've got some links to 2 providers that I use in my description. They both offer this, but you have to add it on. It's an additional cost. And what it does is it allows you to cancel your trip just because you don't want to go. You don't have to have a medical event or a death in the family or a major weather event. If you just changed your mind and decide you don't want to go, you can get some of your money back, but you have to read the fine print. They don't typically cover 100%. Most of them will cover about 75% if you just change your mind and don't want to go. And don't purchase these policies directly through your cruise line or travel agent, because most of the cruise line policies will only give you cruise credit back if you cancel for any reason, not actual money back. If you buy it from a reputable insurer, you get cash back. And cancel for any reason insurance usually has to be bought for a specific amount. And make sure you read the fine print with your carrier, because you usually have to buy at least or more coverage than the full cost of your cruise. And this leads me back to that couple I talked about in the very beginning who had their claim denied because they went on a cruise that was slightly over $10,000. I think it was about $10,100, something in that range. And they bought the cancel for any reason coverage for $10,000. Well, there was some small print in their policy, which is not uncommon, that if you don't buy enough coverage to cover the full cost of your cruise, the insurance company will deny the claim altogether. They're not just going to pay you that lower amount, they'll just pay you nothing. To protect yourself, if you're buying this type of insurance, always insure yourself for slightly more than the entire cost of your cruise. My parents are very risk averse. They'll buy insurance for everything. But my mom once made the mistake of thinking that a government warning would trigger her policy to cover her for canceling a cruise. They generally do not. If a government warns against going to a specific port of call that your ship is going to, and this kind of thing would really scare my mom, she might want to cancel that cruise, but the insurance is not going to reimburse her because of that government warning. Even if the CDC comes out and recommends against cruising for any reason, the insurance policies generally will not cover that. This is another scenario where that cancel for any reason rider or add-on to your policy can be financially worth it, especially for the kind of person that gets a little nervous when the government starts saying there's a lot of criminal activity or crime going on here and maybe you shouldn't go and you want to change your plans. With cancel for any reason, you can, but with the generic policy, they're not going to pay for that. And then there are a lot more things that these policies don't cover when you're on your trip. Now, I do a lot of different excursions when I go on my cruises, and I'm aware that a lot of these things are not covered by cruise travel insurance. That doesn't mean I don't get the insurance, because I'm getting the insurance for a lot of other reasons. But don't make the mistake of assuming that if you're going to do some bungee jumping or some scuba diving or some things that insurers consider a bit high risk, they're going to be on their exclusions list. And some of these exclusions are for some very common activities like horseback riding or zip lining or even doing an ATV ride or a jet ski. Now, you can ask before you buy a policy, or you can read your policy and it will have a list of all these types of activities that are excluded from coverage, which means if you get hurt or injured doing one of the excluded activities during an excursion or at a port of call, your claim would be denied. And just because your travel insurance doesn't want to cover those things, what about your regular health insurance? I speak with a lot of cruisers, and many of them still to this day tell me that their health insurance will cover them, so they have no need to worry about travel or cruise insurance. But that's mostly not true. They're just unaware that their health plan in the US kind of ceases to exist once you leave the country. I mean, it's still there, but they don't cover some of the big expenses that you could incur if something happens when you're on a cruise or at a foreign port of call. For example, if you need a medevac from the cruise ship, that's going to run you upwards of $50,000. And your insurance back home is not going to pay that, but travel insurance does. Or if you have a medical event or an accident, at a foreign port and you need to be in the hospital for a little bit. And sometimes people need medical transport back to the US. Well, that medical transport is not covered. And in some foreign countries, they won't even release you from the hospital until your bill is paid. That's why this travel insurance or cruise travel insurance is vital and very important to protect yourself in the unlikely event that something happens during your trip. But there are some cases where people actually get this travel insurance for free. A lot of us have credit cards these days, and some of these credit cards will actually provide you very similar travel insurance that which you would have to pay for through an independent company for absolutely free. American Express has some cards that offer this. The Chase Sapphire card offers this, and I'm sure there are others. Some of these credit cards actually do offer comprehensive travel insurance that includes medical treatment, medical evacuation, trip delay or cancellation insurance. Find out exactly what you have before you go spending money on something you may not even need. Now that's a great deal. And speaking of deals, if you're looking to book a cruise, we maintain a list of the best cruise deals you can book right now. If you're interested, comment deals or click on the deals link in our description and I'll email it to you. So you got that travel insurance, you're all set to go, you've got the peace of mind. But there's one thing you need to think about if anything does happen on that cruise. Get documentation. Because, for example, one of the common things that these insurers pay out for is, let's say you spent some money on excursion activities at a port of call, and it wasn't through the cruise line. You booked something independent, or you prepaid for a rental car, or you prepaid for day passes somewhere, and that port gets canceled by the cruise line for whatever reason, but the ship's not going there. You need some documentation from the cruise line, usually a letter that you can get from guest services stating that that port was canceled, because all you need to do is provide that to your insurer and you'll get reimbursed for that money that you lost. And that's part of the deal of having this insurance. And if anything more serious happens and you need medical treatment somewhere, or you need to see the doctor at one of these ports of call, get all that documentation, because that's what the insurance company is going to want. And you may be able to make phone calls and try and round up paperwork after the fact, but it's a lot more inconvenient. So if you or the person with you just has that in mind to keep all the documentation, it will help you get your claims paid. And then not all insurers are created equal. I've had several cruisers tell me that they made the mistake of buying their coverage through the cruise line. And the problem is they didn't really realize what they were getting or the lack of what they were getting. Because a lot of times, if you buy this coverage with your cruise line, it only covers that cruise. So if you're flying in and you have a problem with that, or you're flying back home and something happens and you miss that flight, that coverage doesn't protect you against that. It doesn't offer you any reimbursement. And then a lot of times if you buy your coverage directly from the cruise line and say you need to cancel because of a medical event or a death in the family, they don't always want to pay you back in cash. Sometimes they just want to give you future cruise credits for that. And also the coverage limits tend to be lower than what you can find on the marketplace. Always just do a comparison. Take a look at what they're offering, what it covers, and what the price is. And compare it with a couple other companies that have nothing to do with the cruise line. I actually have 2 links in my description to AXA and TravelX, which are great providers, and you can compare price and what's covered. Sometimes the cruise line price will be a little bit less, but it doesn't fully cover you. And especially if you're doing like a repositioning or a transatlantic cruise and you're going to spend part of that trip at the destination. So maybe you're cruising to Europe and then you're going to spend a week in Europe. You want a policy that covers the whole thing, not just the cruise. Next, I'm going to get to a mistake that most people make because they never even heard of it. But first, if you would take a minute and hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. It helps us grow and continue to bring you cruising updates. When I buy something, especially an insurance policy, there's always one or two things, if not quite a few things, that I didn't think about at the time I was buying. And the great thing about these travel insurance policies is that any reputable company offers a free look period to their policy. In some states, it's required by law. And what that means is that you have a period of 10 to 15 days that you can review the policy, and if you don't like it or see something you weren't expecting, you can cancel it and get your money back. Almost nobody takes advantage of this free look policy. But if you weren't sure ahead of time, now's your time to be sure that you got what you needed. Is there a deductible in your policy? What are the coverage limitations? Do you have coverage for baggage? Some policies will tell you that you have $5,000 coverage for your luggage, but only $250 max per item. Well, if the cruise line loses your bag and you've got that iPad or laptop in there, that's likely to well exceed the coverage that's being offered. So you need to look at the specifics of deductibles and coverage limits. And also with your trip cancellation, are there any limitations? Is there a ceiling on what they'll cover, a certain percentage, or will they cover 100%? And then as far as medical coverage and medical evacuation, this is the time to check if there are any exclusions that you weren't aware of that could be a problem for you. The actual policy and the fine print is where claims go to die. So if you take a few moments and read that policy, or at least look through these major components, you could save yourself a big headache. And in fact, you could protect yourself better if you need a better policy. Get out of that one and get into one that covers what you need. So now that you won't make these insurance mistakes, too many cruisers are throwing away money at cruise line gotchas. I'll tell you how to avoid that right here.